Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to episode or blog 39, dated 20th of November 2022. And let's start off with a little bit of a background. It's actually a lovely day today. I remember last week that I mentioned that the weather always seems to be a good way to start one of these blogs. And you know me, scatterbrain Del Boy, can't think how to start one of these blogs off. But again, yesterday we had some lovely sun. Today we've got the sun coming through my window, and I've just gone out into the garden, and unfortunately the grass is just sodden. It's absolutely wet. I was really looking forward to helping my mother again, hopefully, by doing the lawn again, but it looks very much like unless we have a couple more days to dry out, that's not going to happen, because it's a petrol mower. It's quite heavy, and to be quite honest, it will just make the garden look terrible with the wheels churning up through the dirt. So that's a bit disappointing. Couple of things are going to be happening. I'm going to have my hair cut at the end of this week. It needs doing. And yesterday, not yesterday, but I think it was Wednesday, my next door neighbour had their cars valeted by this mobile valet company. You know me, can't help but do a bit of research and be a right nosy sod. So I went onto Facebook and the web page and saw the pictures that he did, and they were really quite nice. So I went out there and had a little chat. As most people know here, I've never had a new car until the car that I've got at the moment. It's not new now. It's an Audi A3 S-Line 2-litre TDI. And it was about 4 or 5 months old when I bought it. It was a bloke. The bloke who bought it was for a company, and the company folded within 3 months. So he returned the car. So it's pretty much new. It had done 4,000 miles when I bought it. So I've had the car from new, and I've never had a valet. I've cleaned it, I've power washed it, I've done all I can to it. But the one thing I'm no good at with cars, and I don't know why I'm useless at it, but I just can't seem to get it right, is that the inside of this car has got matte grey leather seats. And the driver's seat has become incredibly shiny. It seems very much like all the hot weather and then the cold weather and the fact that you sweat, and if you're doing long journeys, it seems very much like water moisture has gotten into the arms of the leather and made it very shiny. And every product I've tried to do to get that out, and I've included a mild use of a hairdryer, just seems to make it worse. So I had a word with this guy and I said, look, how much do you charge? And obviously it's eye-opener how much these valet companies do. And he said that he'd got chemicals that could do that. Not to back to the way that it was, but he would get 80% of that, what was shiny there, back to how the back seats look. And the back seats have never been used, so he's got a guide on how to do it. So I was happy with that. And then he was explaining the different types of valet that he does, and he does two where he puts a sort of a coating over the car, which is like a plastic coating, which lasts, depending on which type of valet number I choose. It'll be one that will last, a couple of months. The max are around about 5 months, and one that will last a couple of years. But the nice thing that this guy does is he charges by the day. Okay, so you can book him for a quarter of a day, half a day, 3/4 of a day, and all day. He's already told me that to do the inside of the car would take at least a quarter of the day. To do the outside of the car with the special coating, that would be a half day. If it was just a normal valet, it'd be another quarter of the day. So you're looking generally at half a day for this guy to do work. But for 3/4 of a day, his price wasn't too bad. It was just over £100. So I booked him for Friday. And I thought, yes, I need to... I live under a lime tree, so all the crap goes onto the car, and he's going to clay bar my car, and put some paint protector on it, and this other coating will do the same after he's waxed it. So I thought to myself, why not? We're approaching winter where there's going to be salt on the roads, all that sort of stuff, and of course every time I wash the car it will just wash off the top crap that's appeared. So as long as I keep sort of like washing it, it shouldn't be too bad. This guy does photos of all the work that he ever does, obviously blanking out the registration plate, and he's got a very good rating. Everybody on Facebook loves him. So I booked him, and my hair's being done on the same day, so while he's doing my car I'll walk downtown, get my hair done, cut should I say, and then walk back up. And that'll be a couple of jobs done on Friday. So that's my week planned. But let's talk about the leading up to the weekend in the 20th. So we start off with the news and the war. Remember, everything that I say in the news I've got no real opinion on. I'm not very political. I'm not that type of minded. I have my own opinions. And if I want to speak them during what I'm about to read out, I will. But the war. The article I read this week was investigation into the missile strike that killed 2 farmers on the Polish border continues. NATO believes it may have been a mistake from perimeter defences of the Ukraine nation, but Ukraine president insists it is not their rocket. I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but this was a biggie at the beginning of the week, and I didn't read what the outcome of it is, whether that investigation's finished. But a stray rocket went over into the Polish border, both sides saying it was their rocket. This has incited NATO. Obviously, if you start attacking then countries on the borders of the particular war area, then you're encouraging Poland to then get into the fight. So saying it's a mistake is an obvious one. In my particular opinion, this is the casualties of war situation, isn't it? So I was interested to know how that outcome is, but I didn't actually find out. So I might do that at the end of the blog. Then we've got Boris Becker. Now, he was back in the news. I mentioned him because it ties in with the first time that I mentioned his name. Back in April, Boris Becker was sentenced to 2.5 years jail term for concealing his assets after he declared himself bankrupt. So what he was doing was he was sort of hiding some of his trophies and important memorabilia and money. So he protected those interests. And then declared himself bankrupt. If you declare yourself bankrupt, you have to sell these things. He was put away for 2.5 years. He will now be home for Christmas under a new scheme where foreign-born criminals agree to be deported. So he's done a deal where he said, yes, deport me. And he then can leave the jail that he's in over here in the UK. And as long as he is immediately deported, we're happy with that. Now, I think if you do something bad in this country and you declare something in this country and you've lived or worked over here for such a long period of time, you're under our laws. I suppose really what I'm trying to say here is that wouldn't it be great that, you know, I go over to America and do something really bad and I just go, oh, it's okay, I don't need to do any jail term. I'll just go back to my country. It's all right. And of course I won't be taking any of your taxpayers' money by keeping me in a prison. No, I wasn't very happy with this story. I believe he should do his term. And I do know how much of a pressure the prison is under working in this industry, I know exactly what is involved in keeping a prisoner in prison, and of course the probation afterwards. So no, I wasn't very happy with that. And then of course the last one is just a little bit of something I'm not really interested in, which is the World Cup. But the tournament is under scrutiny at the moment, and it's all over the papers. So the article I read was migrant workers working as security guards in the park are paid as little as 35 pence per hour. They state they work 12-hour shifts and are allowed 1 day holiday a year. So obviously they've employed migrants to do some security matters around the park where the football is to be played. They're being paid 35 pence per hour, and they get 1 day off a month, and I suppose they're only going to be employed for about 3 months, the lead up, the aftermath, and the actual tournament itself. And so which means they get 3 days. Atrocious. We know all about migrants in this particular country. They're under scrutiny. There's a lot of things in about at the moment about beer and how it's going to be served, about showing signs of affections for people that are gay, all sorts of stuff that is bad, and it's all in the newspapers for you to read, and some of it is just incredibly shocking. So that's just another indication that we need to sort of like do a bit more scrutiny on the tournaments, on where we're holding these world events. This is a World Cup, for God's sake. They won the bid. They got a hell of a lot of money. They're going to get money from the tourism, and yet their rules aren't really being relaxed much. That's the end of the news. Got rid of that quite quick. Don't know what your feelings are about the news. You can put that if you want. It's not really the point of this particular blog, but of course, if you feel strongly about something, mouth out, say it. You know what I mean? Vent, do what you need. Shout outs now. So, as you know, I always like to give a shout out. I get immense pleasure by doing shout outs. And those are because I've always considered time as a commodity that you can't give back. And if you spend your time writing a comment to me or asking a question or something like that, then I'm immensely happy. I try to give, therefore, equal time back to you guys by answering. Now, some of it's in this blog and some of it's written down. And believe me, I spend quite some time writing out comments. But I love to do it. And it's great to read over those lovely comments that you leave. And I especially love the questions because it helps me out with the blog. But the shout outs, and you only, like I say, only have to just make a 1-line comment for me to do that. But they are Cauldron of Stardust, Jambon, Down the Rabbit Hole, Martroid, Rocket Bunny, Colin Jones, Steve's Gaming, Denny, Robert's Retro Gaming, GTB Films, Milfy Swinbuckle, Ponder, and then I did a live stream and these people commented at the end of the stream and or during the stream. 20th Century Gaming, Colin Ferguson, and Mark whatever. Thanks very much, guys, for joining me in my little live stream. We'll talk about a little bit about what I've done this week because it's a little bit later on. But you guys really cheered me up, and that stream went on a little bit longer than I thought it was going to. I got so addicted into a couple of those games that I did a couple of runs instead of just doing one run and move on to another game. So that was immensely enjoyable. And now we get to the bit where there's the comments and the questions, and I have to sort of like think a little bit, but I'm going to have a little bit of product placement. And start getting into some of the comments. Okay, so first one I've got here is GTB Films. So he was very happy with some of the space age things that were in the last blog. And he's asked a question a little bit space related. He's put, do you think this latest drive of going into space will result in mankind landing on Mars in our lifetime? Do you think we'll have people living there permanently? And would you sign up for the one-way trip if you had the opportunity? And will that be another milestone reached only to stagnate for another 50 years? Or will we keep driving space exploration forward this time? Yes, what a question. The one thing that happened really with the moon landing was it was almost 10 years to get us to the moon. There was a few deaths, it was a lot of money, and it was a lot of money at a time where America really couldn't afford it. But it was a race, and it was a race between two huge nations. And I suppose there was a lot of pride in it. And if you've got a president that had given a statement or a line in the sand that said, we will do this, and then that president goes and gets assassinated, a year later, there's a lot of pride that goes in there and says, we'll get this done. The driving force or the light that started it may be gone, but will continue. So we've now got a number of private entrepreneurs doing stuff for the space race. Only this time it's really not a race. And that's because what we have to understand, what we learnt about the moon landings is that we then went up several more times. But each time we went up, people got bored. Seeing the same pictures, the same discussions, did it happen, all of that sort of stuff. The technology really didn't improve, and all we were doing was just doing return trips and learning not an awful lot, or should I say we weren't learning an awful lot at the time. So it stagnated, and then we started to put all of our development into reusable spacecrafts, and that went on for decades, and we're no further forward. Moon is the furthest place we visited, as a place that we can travel to, not in the furthest reaches of where we can get to. Don't want to forget Voyager and all the satellites we've sent up. So do I think that this latest result will make us land on Mars in my lifetime? I think so. I think the one thing about privatization of something like this is the name you make for yourself and the forward expanse of science and how we understand it. I think there's so much going on at the moment on our planet that we should be probably spending a little bit more time fixing those problems. Christ, we're always bringing up about climatization, and here we are talking about going to Mars. But I do think it's a very important thing to do, and I do think that there is a place for both of them. But I think we need to prolong our planet a bit more. I think it will happen. Do you think we'll have people living there permanently? And would you sign up for the one-way trip if you had the opportunity? Yes, I've heard it's one way. There was a Big Bang Theory episode, I think, where Sheldon signed up for such a trip. Didn't impress his girlfriend too much. But not in my lifetime will we live there. That's for certain, I think. Will we live there? From what I know of the science behind it, we could possibly live there. And it would be a logical step to go to, because I think they consider Mars our sister planet. It's beyond the asteroid belt, but basically we believe it formed sort of at the same time as the Earth, and at some point it did have an atmosphere. So it is sort of like our twin. But yeah, I think we will. But would I go? No. It's funny, but I've always wanted to go into space, but I've never wanted it to be a one-way trip. It's not like something where you can say, oh, I'm homesick, I want to go home. You can't. You're stuck there. You've got to have a really strong mind, I think, to say, I'm willing to leave this planet and not come back to it. And all I'll ever see now is a picture of it through a telescope or whatever on where I'm going to land. And of course, if we do land, because you could end up not, having an accident, all sorts of things can go on. And will there be another milestone reached only to stagnate for another 50 years? My hope is that won't happen. I think the more we fix our own planet and our own problems and sort out our own issues, the more we have the ability to continue projects. Projects get stopped because of cash, money, time, and otherworldly things. So it all depends on how we want to pull together. This war that's going on is pointed to me that we haven't learned anything, and that we can't work together as a world, which is sad. But we need to have that to do space exploration. So I hope that's a good enough answer for you. That was a very interesting question, GTB, and one of the things that I would have loved to have answered back in my teens and 20s, where I was all over space travel. Oh my God, I bought books, and I've got universe pictures and stats on the planets and all sorts of stuff. It's like as a kiddie you're into dinosaurs, do you know what I mean? And I was into all things to do with space. So thank you for that. Milfy, yep, good old Milfy, we love Milfy. Always comes up with very well structured questions, and ones that require quite a bit of thought. Excuse me fiddling about, but I'm in pain at the moment and I'm taking painkillers. But I'll talk about that a bit as well. So his question is there an element in games that doesn't get touched on that you think might improve the game or even the genre of the game? For example, the things that bother me with fighting, brawl and sports games are how the character or team you play tend to have unlimited energy, or in some shoot 'em up games your bullets flow from you in a constant stream, so you just keep firing knowing that there is no reason to stop and time your shots. And with a lot of games, independent of the genre, the fact that it's more about memorizing something of the pattern than reacting to the enemy who should try and counter-attack you, reacting to what you do. And he's given an example. Take fighting as an example. In a real life situation, if you were to get into a scrap and go hell for leather at your enemy, throwing punches and kicks without stopping to take a breath, see how long you would last before you were flat on your back, blowing out of your arse just before you get pummeled. I believe that if these elements got addressed more in games, the experience would be much better. Anyway, not sure though if you agree, but I do wonder if you too are bothered by these things, or perhaps by another element in gameplay that I haven't touched upon. That's very interesting. I did do a little bit of your reading of your question before this blog, but I didn't do any research or anything. So my answer is going to be pretty much off the top of my head. But I don't know if anybody watched one of my gaming histories, but I mentioned in one of my gaming histories when I went back to Space Invaders that we shouldn't give up on going back to a granddaddy of a game, just because the later games have got something that's more shiny in it, and therefore it is more enticing for you to play than going back to something that's old. Now the good thing about Space Invaders was it was you against a horde of aliens. You fired a shot and basically you really couldn't fire another shot until that shot finished, and the aliens came down in a set pattern, and it was your accuracy and your timing that got you through that level. Unlike something like Gradius, where Gradius has that at the beginning where you really do need to be accurate to pick up these extras. But then it's your choice of extras that sort of like help you get through that level. And if you ramp up in too much in one particular extra, the game knows this and adapts. But what it tends to be is it then turns into us like a bullet hell, because the wave of the creatures tend to be in the same places, but they might do something a little bit that you don't notice, like firing twice instead of once or whatever. But they're generally in the same place. They move around. The patterns are there, and of course the landscape is always the same. It's not really generated on the fly much, although there are, I think, a couple of shoot 'em ups where it's a random generated landscape. So what am I trying to get at? I'm with you that when it comes to shoot 'em ups, I used to be a real big fan about what the next shoot 'em up was going to look like, because it was all about the particle effects and how much you destroyed on the screen. But the early games was all about how many waves can I kill with this one little ship that I've got, and it's piddly firepower. There is equal enjoyment in both, but I think I would favour the me against hordes than the how more powerful can I get to the end. Because the one thing about it all with both of these is you reach the end of what you can possibly see different. I don't mean the end of the game, because things go round again. But what I'm trying to say is you're not going to see any new aliens, you're not going to see any new graphics, you're not going to see... You reach the end of the wave and they come on again. You reach the end of the landscape, you'll get to a new landscape. At the end, you'll come across 5 or 6 of these different landscapes and you'll revolve back round. So, to be quite honest, they're as bad as each other, but I would rather my accuracy get better than the random part of me choosing an element that gets me through the level quicker. I suppose it all goes back to my age again, really, here, Milfy, and I think to myself, I'm starting to become that grumpy old man, but I'm starting to also like going back to those older games and getting the enjoyment that I've had so much in the recent years by having these weapons that sparkle and shine like the sun. So I'm starting to go back to the simplicity of things. You mentioned fighting, and it's funny that when I was reading your question, the thing that came to mind was I don't think there are many of these fighting games that are as you describe. I remember Frank Bruno's Boxing and Nintendo's Punch-Out. It wasn't actually that you were powering up that made your gloves glow and then you smacked the hell out of them. It was the fact that you got accurate punches in, which must obviously therefore attack their stamina, and you therefore, if you got a good punch in, do a stunning punch, which means that you haven't built yourself up into a golden glove situation where you suddenly are Bruce Lee when you've been hammering hell for leather. It's the fact that the other guy is blinking, moving, and basically in a bad defense situation that your punch will get there. So boxing's a perfect example where that stamina bit comes in, yes. Because I remember a game on the Master System called Rocky where you just kept punching and punching and punching, your stamina went down. It's almost like you're punching thin air, and punching thin air still takes away energy from you. So they brought all that into boxing. But I must admit the arcade games like Kung Fu Master and all of that don't have that in. It's all about being overwhelmed by all sides in that particular game. So I think they've done a pretty good job when it comes to sports games and how they manage energy. But even in the earliest games, like, do you remember Activision's Decathlon or Daley Thompson's Decathlon? Yeah. All that happened in those games were that basically all they did was change the numbers. There was no increase in anything else. If it was 2 players, then you were fighting against another person which might have more stamina than you and probably got luckier with the left and right movements of that waggling. But all you were doing in a 1-player game was trying to beat a world record, and those world records were set so low that you could do it. And the further you got into the game, the more you did the decathlon for the second time or the third time, the more tired you were, and then those world records were then unobtainable. So again, that worked out quite well. I don't think I've answered your question very well, Milfy, but I'm with you in that when it comes to shoot 'em ups, that's definitely one where I go for the more simplistic than the building up of your ship. So I hope that did answer your question. You're going to have another drink. I do apologise. Then we got Jambon. Good old Jambon. I like Jambon. He's really, really quite good. And he's a major person that, talks a lot in our Discord channel that Mainmeister opened. Really, really bunch of great guys in there. If anybody ever wants to join one, all you have to do really is just click on a link that is always present during one of Mainmeister's Sunday live streams and join in with a great crowd. So I think he's got a question for me. Unfortunately, it's buried. Let's have a little look. Okay. I have a question for you, that's okay. What are your thoughts on Steam these days? Not just as a shop, but as a kind of a gaming and social ecosystem. Do you ever veer towards or away from competitors such as itch.io or Good Old Games? I've asked a similar question, so feel if you need to ignore it, but I'd really like to know your opinion. Yeah, that's great. I'll tell you what, it's been up and down for me. We've now got so many different outlets to get our games. So many of them now are asking also for us to install their launcher for you to play that game, and I hate that. The reason I went to Good Old Games over Steam was because of this DRM aspect of things, the digital rights management, where I don't like Big Brother watching me. I don't like to buy a game only to find 4 years later they turn off the server and you can't play it anymore. All of that crap that we used to have. I think we used to have a thing called GameSpy, didn't we? Years back, that auto-installed when you put in a game. Oh, all of that stuff was absolute pure nonsense. And I'm so glad we moved away from it. But the separate launcher, when you're buying an old game, I think is wrong. Steam's a platform where indie developers can go and do their games, and obviously it benefits the indie player and it benefits Steam because you got it from one place. Some of the money goes to Steam, some of the money goes to the indie company. And of course they can see the stats of you playing it and all of that sort of stuff. But again, that's that Big Brother aspect that I don't like. The patching is therefore very, very simple though, because when you load it up, it will download the latest patch. But again, it doesn't give you really the choice. It does it automatically. What if there was something in there that you like it as it is? They've changed the balance of the game. The balance of the game was so fine that it's now ruined your experience. You can't really go back. I don't think you can anyway. The thing about Good Old Games that I liked was in the early days with no launcher was they gave you the game. Later on, if there was a patch, they gave you the patch in your account. It was your choice whether you wanted to install that patch. And some of these patches would also make the game better for modern systems. You make them work under more operating systems, which was a great thing. I'm not into achievements and all of that sort of stuff too much. I've had an awful lot of that through my console experiences since, about the year 2000, 2002. So they've worn out their shininess and greed aspect in me. I'll just do once more to get this one achievement. I totally fell out with it in one particular game that I'd have had to have played the game for the next 15 years to get this achievement. I won't name what the game was, but I think I remember which one it was. But it was atrocious. It was like you'd have to go around the game 50 times without dying once or something. They put something astronomical in the way, and it's just bad. It's almost like variants in comics, where the shop has to order 100 of the comic to get this one variant, which makes this variant the most sought after thing. But all it is a cover, for God's sake. It's all to get your money out of you. But I'm moving away a little bit. I've started to use Steam a lot more because the other companies like Humble Bumble and Fanatical, they do these sales, and you can get 10 games for a couple of quid, and it built my Steam library up to a level where I'm nearly at 2,000 or 3,000 games. But to put it in context, I preferred GOG for so many years, for the reasons that I gave, and yet I haven't risen above 2,000 games on there yet. I'm just under. So I moved away to Steam purely because they all link into the ecosystem that you're talking about, the Steam. But has Steam got enough positive points to redeem itself for the things that I don't like about it? Yes, it does. Obviously, they're trying to have a one platform for all. And they're also trying to make it so that games run incredibly well by giving you a patching system that works for you. And they're doing it because they now move into the hardware era with their Steam Deck. So, of course, when you can give your developers Steam Decks to write your game on, you can then optimize it for that and make it so that there's a version for your PCs with higher specs. All of that is micromanaged because of their big brother policies, basically. So in some ways they redeem themselves for that, because there's nothing worse than bugs, crashes and all of that sort of stuff. But then again, their ecosystem also allows you early access, and the early access system is a totally different topic. In fact, that might be a good topic for one of you guys to raise and say, well, what is it, Dalboy? Do you like that aspect of gaming where you're the bug tester? I mean, it's come up a number of times, but I don't think we've ever really had a good answer to that. But I hope that answers in the fact that Steam has come up slightly in my opinion of them. I still prefer the older, good old games method. But even them, they've started to use a launcher. So it's swings and roundabouts, really, isn't it? Thank you very much for that. Now we get to Denny. Now, Denny. Now, I came across Denny a month or so back. And he was doing something that I hadn't seen much before. Which was how adventure games, how much enjoyment we had in them, because it's almost like a tongue that we don't, a language we don't talk anymore, like Latin. It's a forgotten thing. We've moved away from adventures. And he brought back memories of me and my VIC-20 and the adventure games I played on there, where there were no graphics and everything was in my mind. And as we got talking, our interests are virtually the same. What we watched on TV, what we listened to in our teenage lives, and so, we're now battling with each other about wouldn't say battling, but it's like, do you remember this? Oh yeah, I remember that. How do you remember that? I thought I was the only one. You know, that sort of thing. Which is great, enjoyable to me, because it's not a one-upmanship, but it starts a spark onto something else that I wouldn't have thought of unless this person had mentioned it. And that's what I love. I love that. If I could have that every day, I'd be so happy. So he's, like Ponder, bullet pointed absolutely everything till we get to the bottom. And I tell you what, the bottom is after 2 A4 sheets of paper, I would have said, of counter answers to my blog last week. Fantastic, Denny. Thank you. Question. What game of Jeff Minter's would you like to see him go back to and redo for a modern audience? Now, that's obviously one of the many questions that you get, or similar questions that we get all the time, which is, what old game would you like to see redone? But this one's specific. It's Jeff Minter, so he's listened to my blog, knows I'm a big Jeff Minter fan, wants to know, is there anything that's in his back catalogue you'd like to see redone? And that brings me to what I was talking about at the beginning, because I'd have to check this, because as I've moved forward, I've become less and less honed in on particular programmers. And although I've been on Steam and I've bought no end of Jeff Minter games that he's done recently, like Moose Life and so forth, I talked earlier on about mowing the lawn, and I remember one of his earliest games was Hover Bother, which is a simplistic little game, but one of these ones that I just love to do on a rainy Sunday. Oh my God, the first thing I'll do is go, yeah, I want to mow the lawn because it's raining outside. Yeah, of course I do. But I don't think he's gone back to Hover Bother. I'm not sure why. It had some of the best sounds in that game, you know, those arcadey rich bleeps and blops. Had an irritating tune, you know, English Country Garden. It's all in my head now, that bloody tune. But it had that element of somebody, you've nicked their mower, somebody wants their mower back, you're trying to mow the lawn, you've got a dog, it gets in the way, but it can also be used as a deterrent for keeping the person who's trying to nick the mower back. Would that be good remastered? Would it blemish something that I seriously like going back to? That he could blemish it, but would I want him to try it? Oh, for God's sake, yes. I would say Hover Bother is the one game I'd like to see him redone. He's done Grid Runner and Matrix and all of those, and made them all neon-y and lovely and VR and all sorts of stuff. Hover Bother, I think, would be one I'd like him to go back to, but I'd prefer to see something new from him that doesn't use any old traits. I'd rather that than going back to an older game. So secondary, I'd like to see him do Hover Bother. First off, I'd like him to do something as imaginative as Sheep in Space or Ballistics, is that what it's called? Ballistics or something? Ancipital was a key example of manic Minter in total coding frenzy to bring out a game with gravity, inertia and everything. We're talking forward planning here, you know? So I'd like him to do something like that for my gaming delights. Please, Jeff, if you're listening. Then we get to Steve's Gaming, and Steve Gaming always gets my number one salute. Well, I could do it a couple of times. My salute. No, Steve's great. Another one, a person I have an awful lot of time for. He just basically, he's sort of like in tune with me, and his output is great. He's come up with 2 questions again. Oh, okay. And he does it to annoy. You know what I mean? As much as he says in his gameplay videos, if he ever does mention my name, he always says he's done this on purpose. That Del Boys gave me this game just to annoy me, you bastard. You know, that sort of thing. We have that sort of tit for tat. You wait till I give you the next one. Anyway, number 1. What game do you think you have played for the longest time overall? Very easy, Guild Wars. Certain games allow you to look at the time that you've played in a game. And although Guild Wars doesn't do that, Guild Wars 2 does. And Elite does that as well, as anybody that watches certain channels, you know, with Lakoza and so forth, where if you total up all his hours, he's already told you exactly how long he's played the game. I've played a lot of games, and I've been on and off of them through the years. But if you were to add the minutes up together, I don't think you'd come anywhere near as close as a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And my very first one was Guild Wars. And I know that on Guild Wars 2, I was on and off of it a lot. You know, I played it extensively for about 3 years, 4 years, went away, came back after a year, went away again, came back again, and I haven't loaded that up now for 11 months, I would say. Even though there's an expansion out, I haven't bought the expansion, and it's the first time I haven't done something like that. In fact, it's Black Buyers Week, isn't it? It's the Black Friday all-week sales thing. I might go to some place like CD Keys and see if I can get that expansion cheap now. I don't think it will make me want to play it for any length of time, but it's just my completeness that makes me want to go and say, I've got it all. Do you know what I mean? But it's very easy, Guild Wars, because like World of Warcraft, you put in a massive amount of hours. But the second closest to that would be probably a strategy game, a real-time strategy game. There were certain real-time strategy games that you used to play as well online, and I remember I used to play Command and Conquer Generals and Supreme Commander and games like that. That if you put the hours together, I would go into the, you've played that for, you know, like 2 weeks straight. You know what I mean? If you put all the hours together. I mean, I know that Supreme Commander 2 on Steam says I've played it for 104 hours. But if you divide that by 24, you'll know that that's not an awful lot, really. And also, it's a bad thing to measure that, because if you leave the game on the main menu and you go off and have your tea and come back, it still counts as game time. So work it out yourself. Hope that's answered that, because I've given a specific game there. And 2, Metropolis, made in 1927. Yeah, I know the film. Yeah. In your opinion, is it a real sci-fi classic or vastly overrated crap? What a bastard. You know, I'm going to fall into a trap here. I give every film the benefit of the doubt, but I saw Metropolis in my teens. There was a TV show after Barry Norman's film show by an Alex Cox called Movie Drone. And he used to do a cult film type introduction to a film that was a cult film, and then an outro to it. And he would explain all about the budget, how it was made, what the reactions were when it was shown, all that sort of stuff. It was top-notch stuff. It was on BBC Two, and I used to look forward to my Sundays when that was on. I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday. Metropolis was seen then, I think. And the one thing I can say about Metropolis is it excelled in visuals for its time. You know, it was what could we do back then to make something look like the future? And I think from that point of view, it succeeded. Story, bollocks. I can watch it. I can look at the majesty of what they tried to do as a film. Bollocks. And even when I'm saying that, I'm saying it tongue in cheek, because there is a story there, and there's an overwhelming gloss to it all, but you can't hide the fact that there really isn't much to the film. There's a little bit of thought about where we're going, where we'll end up, but we've done that genre now so much that we've answered a lot of those dystopian futures, utopian futures, that it's now considered a granddaddy, a bit like that Space Invaders analogy. So I hope I've answered it really, in the fact that I give any film the benefit of the doubt, and I love its what they tried to do, the gloss, what they could do back then. I mean, it's totally, it's almost like that, that everything before Star Wars and everything after Star Wars when it comes to effects. You know what I mean? It's that. But when it comes to the story and so forth, underwhelming. And I hope that answers that question. And I think we come to the last one, which is my lovely mate Colin Jones, who bullet points everything, and always has a way of saying something to me, that doesn't make me put up a defense barrier. You can have a different opinion, and at some point you've got to set back and go, you're both right, or you both have an opinion about something, or no, you were right and you were wrong. You've got those forks in the road of where you're going to end down. Anyway, my question for the next blog, this is from Colin. Do you miss tape loaders? I don't mean the boring unmodified loaders that just use standard routines, but those with a loading screen and music, or even a game to watch, listen to, or play a game as it was loading. Do you know what? I miss those days. I miss those days. Do I miss the loader? Probably not. I've become one of those impatient brats that just want the game to load. And for years and years, I played role-playing games where I didn't want the level to load up. I wanted it to be seamless, which eventually happened in one particular role-playing game, which has I've lost my train of thought on at the moment. But anyway, you really wanted to be able to go over the landscape and not see a buffering or anything, right? And tape loaders were, because of the lack of memory, were extensively used. But I bought games just to listen to the music that was playing while it loaded. I bought games because there was something new or interesting, like a mixer load, or where you could make your own music up with some sort of like drum type editor, or play Space Invaders while the game was loading, or the amount of things that they did during those times was phenomenal. And it's almost like going over to America and seeing how they handle queues. When you're queuing up for something, right? The Back to the Future ride is a perfect example. The queues go on for miles, right, during the high periods. There are televisions telling you the story of the ride that you're going to be going on, that gives you little snippets like Doc Brown Back in Time and all of this sort of stuff. And then you actually get to the ride and you feel like you've been on a journey. I miss tape loaders, and even under emulation, I'll try and find a game that will speed load but give you the same experience as what the tape loader did, like play that Space Invader game before the game loads, because you can do that now. But I loved them. The amount of times I watched those colour bars around the outside of the main play screen, and I'd look at them and go, that's mesmerising. It's almost hypnotic. And all those wonderful loading screens that we saw on the Spectrum and the Commodore 64, and all of those 8-bit machines where, they drew Hunchback or they drew Daley Thompson, or the picture, some of the picture art that was there. Ghosts and Goblins is a fantastic one. I miss that. I really do miss that. But how can we incorporate it now with the fact that we've got SSD drives and we can load a game now very, very fast? There's very little now for that. But I will never forget the joy I had of listening to another Rob Hubbard tune, David Whittaker tune, Ben Dalglish tune, a loading screen that had more colours on than you thought that you could ever produce. A game to play while it's loading up. This was a time where expansion was a joy. You know what I mean? To make something mundane enjoyable. Great. Miss those days. And that's the end of the questions. My God. I hope I haven't overstepped things a little bit. But we now come to the sort of things like I've watched and and all that sort of stuff, and just my opinions on it. So, as you know, I watched This Week in Retro, and the last couple of weeks I've been underwhelmed. But This Week in Retro on YouTube was fun this week. They talked about keyboards and what type of keyboards we use. They also talked about FMV, how that was used, and how a forgotten game with FMV in it has been found. And they talked a little bit about a new project that's incorporating the Scum adventuring system with the Freescape engine. And all of that was in my quarter of I want to listen to this, rather than having the odds and sods of stuff that I'm just not interested in. So like I said, it's a bit like Tomorrow's World. This one was a great one. The other 2 weeks, bit of a mix. Always enjoyable though, don't get me wrong. Always something that I won't miss. Techmoan. Now, he didn't do too much this week, but he did do an article that made me smile, because apparently he got lots of comments about his what was it called, the Soundburger, which was the record player, portable record player, where he mentioned that there was no headphone socket, right? And there isn't on this device, but there is a line out, and people were saying, you got it wrong, there is a headphone socket, it's called the line out socket. I don't believe that there are people out there that still think the line out socket is the headphone socket. I can't believe that, but apparently he got more comments on that this week, that he had to do a 15-minute video this week to explain the differences between line out and headphones, right? So worth a watch, just to look at how crazy some people are. And before we go down the point of, yes, you can use line out as a headphone socket, you go ahead and do that and see whether there's an amplifier in there loud enough to do that in there, and the fact that there's no volume control on the device. Okay. Then Adam Martin is one that I go back to now and again, and he came back to me this week because ITV, if anybody has just noticed, has changed their ident cards. That's the identity of the channels. So ITV's rebranded, it's now got 1, 2, 3 and so forth, but they changed all of their introductions, and they've done that because they're introducing next week, is it, or maybe in the next 2 weeks, the ITVX streaming channel. Now, I knew of this coming, but I didn't understand why it was coming, and I thought it wouldn't happen. And the reason for that is we've got BritBox. And BritBox is a combination of ITV and BBC's best of programmes as a streaming service. Well, then ITV are now doing their own streaming service. It makes sense in a way because BBC has always had one called iPlayer. But I'm thinking to myself, isn't this really just going to water down BritBox? And BritBox is not that strong in the first place. So all the new idents are out. He's done a review of all of the new idents, and he's given a bit of a preview of what he thinks will be in ITVX's streaming service and whether he thinks it will succeed or not. Interesting. Adam Martin, very good thing to look at. And then Euphoria Pictures, he started to unbox his deluxe box sets of films. Now, I don't do unboxing. I've shown you what I bought, but he's got huge box sets, you know, stuff well out of my quote quarter. Do you see what I mean? He's got this lovely Hitchcock set, right? It's in Blu-ray format, and every single film is in a canister that looks like a film reel, and they're all lined up with the films on the edges in a see-through plastic container, and a booklet that's at the back with all the posters and lobby cards in it. Would love it, right? It goes on eBay for hundreds and hundreds of pounds. He bought it for £75 about 3 years ago, and that must have been the buy of the decade, when you consider how much this damn thing was, how few they made. And he must have got it like at 3 or 4 a.m. or something in the morning, because of some person who doesn't know how to put stuff on eBay. So good for him. Nice to watch, because you see some of the crap that you get in some of these box sets, and some of the joys you can get out of some of them. Some of them are done with real passion and love, so that's really good. Okay, and then we move on to what I've been watching of you guys. So I've watched Ponder, absolutely fantastic. You know, I've just talked about him just now. He did a Pac-Man stream with a bolt-on lunar lander stream, which he's going to carry on for, I think, a week or so, which was absolutely enjoyable. And he did a blog earlier this week, which has many aspects that I would recommend that you go and watch. That was great. Great on you, Ponder. I can't wait to see your next blog, but I do know that that'll be a couple of weeks yet. Keep up the good work, matey. Fantastic stuff. Robert's Retro Gaming. Now, love Robert. You know, he's production line Robert, as I call him. Continuing doing his Minecraft stuff. But he did a couple of 8-bit games which were very enjoyable for me, and that's probably because he got my my brain itch on things that from the past, you know, my retro itch. So he did a couple of remakes that were on the Atari. He did a Death Chase from the Spectrum days, now redone on the Atari, and Chucky Egg, which was on all sorts of different systems, and then he showed off the Atari version. Absolutely fantastic. And I had a little bit of a discussion with him about Death Chase, and Chucky Egg always wins anyway. I don't think there's really that many bad versions of Chucky Egg. I think there is one that I didn't rank very highly, and the 64 one is a little bit weak, but as a game, everybody enjoys it regardless. You can load one of them up and you'll still get enjoyment out of it. Then we get to Steve's Gaming. Salute, sir. I've got to read what I put here. Oh. Yes, he did a couple of BBC games and a new Spectrum game. He's not done so much this week. That was right. That was in my head this week. I was going, cool, I'm not seeing so much from Steve, but he's not been very well. He's been unwell like me. You'll come across me in a moment on what I've done, and I haven't done an awful lot. I've had problems with my throat. I've got problems with my back at the moment, which I'll talk about as well in a moment. But I did like what he brought out. I think the BBC doesn't get used that much, and it's always a joy to see a game that he enjoyed and a game that he missed, because I tell you what, this guy's not missed much. My God, if his bank account back then. Anyway, what can I say about Steve other than I always look forward to his stuff. It's missed when it doesn't come out, and I always look forward to everything that comes out from that guy's stable. LFC did a blog. The thing about LFC is that his blogs are always got something of interest in it. But as we move into the football season, it's more football orientated, and so I tend to drift in and out of it, which is a shame. But he talks in such a way, and his comments afterwards are so verbose and great that you can't not get enjoyment out of watching one of his blogs. Definitely worth a listen to. And you know, like I say, there have been weeks where he's talked about games, and I've listened to every word and then come up with my own answers to them, which is just what you want out of a blog. Then we've got Rabbit. Now, Rabbit did an awful lot this week. You know, usually I see 1 or 2 from him. He did 3, I think, this week. He did a Vectrex look at called Cave Racer, which looked very much like Scramble without the firing in it. I showed this to my mum, and I said, "Mum, this is the sort of game that we used to play." She said, "Why is this helicopter flying between 2 heartbeat readings?" you know, when you've got the heartbeat like this. I said, "Mum, that's a cave." And she went, "Well, I can draw better than that." And I then had to have a big long discussion about how mathematics we used to draw this cave. And at the end of it, she weren't having any of it. She just turned around and said, "I could do better." So I left it with, "You bloody try and do it better then, Mum," and walked away. But that was an interesting conversation with my mum. Then he had another discussion in regards to a film called Soldier. Now, I'm with him. Soldier's not a great film. It's a Kurt Russell film. Came out later than Blade Runner. But there has always been skepticism and discussion in regards to, is Soldier in the same universe as Blade Runner? Right? And that's because of all of these little Easter eggs that they put in these films these days. You know, where people freeze frame a computer panel and they start reading what's on the computer panel, and there'll be swear words on the computer panel because you're not supposed to freeze frame anything, you know. And there's lots of references, therefore, to films Kurt Russell has been in and references to Blade Runner. And of course, Soldier was co-written by a person who also did Blade Runner. I've always had this skepticism about Soldier by just turning around and saying it's just another story in the same universe but has nothing to do with it. Blade Runner is about replicants and how much time we have in our lives, and Soldier is about warfare, cloning, and how throwaway our world is, right? But it's got similarities because it's the off-world colonies, all of that sort of stuff. So there is a similarity in the fact that replicants are there to do a jobs that we as humans don't want to do. Soldiers are doing exactly the same thing. They're battling our battles because we don't want to put ourselves out there. So you genetically engineer soldiers. Similar, you see? But I have always put it as it's nothing. It's not a sequel. It's not a prequel. It's another story in the same universe, and I'll always argue the point that that's what it is. And that was a thoroughly enjoyable video, and he was getting more and more drunk as he kept talking about it. Loved it. Thanks very much. And then Denny, who I mentioned earlier on, did one of his latest videos. His output, like I say, is not high, but quality-wise, they're better than a lot. You know, they're definitely better than my stuff, I tell you that much. He did a look at the VIC-20s version of the game Hero, and if anybody has ever spoken to me knows that I bring Hero up every time as a game that was in my youth and I loved and played to death. The VIC-20 has now got a version. You need a RAM expansion, you need a, you know, to play it, but oh my god, what a good job that they've done. And he did a sort of like a spotlight on it, and just really good, and something that you really want to take your time out and watch. And then we just get to the closing bits, is what have I watched on TV and stuff. Now, I talked about adventure stuff, and I learned about a week or so ago about a documentary that was made in 2010 called Get Lamp, which was all about how text adventures were the thing back in the day. Absolutely great documentary. It's about an hour and a half long. It's not particularly long, but there was definitely things in there that I loved. And then yesterday I watched a documentary, I think it was on Netflix, called Pepsi, Where's My Jet? I thought, do I really want to watch this? But they do a little trailer, and in this trailer it showed that Pepsi once offered all their consumers a Harrier jump jet if you saved enough points, right? And you needed 7 million Pepsi points, right? It was supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek joke, but America took it as real, and they worked out that you could buy this jet for 700,000, and the actual jet is worth, like, I don't know, I think it was like 30-40 million. So these people got together and bought all of the points needed, and then went to Pepsi and said, you owe us a jet. Very, very interesting documentary on how that one all wound up, ended. But that's a great documentary. And then the only TV series that I really watched this week was a program called 1899, which is about a ship that went missing, is found again, and all of its passengers have gone, and only one has survived. It's 8 episodes long. I watched it, really liked it. You can suck me in quite easily with these Bermuda Triangle type stories. This one isn't in the Bermuda Triangle, but what I'm trying to say is a ship goes missing, it's a ghost ship now, and all of that sort of stuff. It's on Netflix, definitely worth the 8 episodes, and it made my week much more enjoyable than it started off as being. And that then brings me nicely into this week. So this week I haven't been very well. I wanted to make my mum proud, and I decided that I'd steam clean the floors, because we've got the kitchen tiles. Our living room has got tiles on the second living room, not the first. The first living room's carpeted, and the main stairway is wooden floor. So I got the steam cleaner out, steam cleaned that, hoovered up like I normally do, and then I noticed that the side banisters, and the skirting boards needed a good steaming. So I got the steamer out and did that, but I pulled my back. This is where I have to be very, very careful with sciatica, because what happens is if you stretch too much, you tear the scar tissue away from the operation that I had, and I'm now in pain. So I'm taking now painkillers. Not great. But my mum loved what I'd done, and I continue to be the son that she wants me to be, and I'll do everything that I can for her. In many ways, it's a good job I can't mow the lawn, because I'd do it. Even though I'm in pain, I'll just take a couple more painkillers. At the moment, I take 2 painkillers a day. I went up to 6 yesterday. You can go up to 8. I have to be very careful because of the codeine element. But I do know that I'm not going to get addicted to them. I've taken cocodamol for years, and I only ever take what I need to get me through the day, and usually that's one tablet, maybe 2. So just so you know, I'm on the ball. I'm not going to get stupid on tablets. So because I've not been well this week, I've not produced much. I brought out a live stream, which I loved. I demonstrated a game. I think it was called Tiny Rogues, which is it's a sort of a roguelike type dungeon crawler, but you get a choice at the top of the screen when you complete the level, of going left or right, and the left would give you more energy, or the right one would give you coins and whatever. There are 10 rooms on each floor. There are 10 floors. There is a a boss at the end of each of the 10 floors, and there are power-ups in the weapons that you get. All of that, all very simplistic mechanics. But it's such an enjoyable little game that I recommend it, especially at its price range, you know. So that was one. And then to show that I listen to you guys, I basically bought a game called Donut Dodo, which Ponder Colin recommended. Now, I like little arcade games, and I only get to know about games if I research it myself or somebody else mentions it. And not many people do that for me, so I'm tending to do that and then telling you guys. So it was great. I thought to myself, you've recommended this game, you've seen what I play, I'm going to see whether you've got me bang on or not, and I'll buy this game. And I played it and I liked it, you know, nothing wrong with it. It definitely is out of my comfort zone in the fact that it's not vector, it's not neon, it's not thrust, it's not gravity orientated. It's an arcade game. But from an arcade game point of view, I played arcades, and I used to love things like Mr. Do's Castle and all of that sort of stuff. So, did I feel bad about buying this game? No. Did I get great enjoyment out of it? Yes. Did I think that it warranted me doing a stream on it? Bloody right. Of course I do. And like I say, there will be people that might recommend games after this stream. I don't know. But all I have to do is read a description, go on YouTube, see if it's something that I like. In this one, I did it blind. I just looked at the Steam's introduction on it, and I bought it. And I'm glad that I did. It was an eye-opener. And then, of course, I did my stream back onto the Genesia game, which is a bit like Vampire Survivors. And I finished I saved a world during the stream, and that's why it went on a bit too long. I love those rogue bullet hell type games. By the way, that other game that I talked about, that Tiny Rogues, it's like Robotron. If you want to know, it's a twin stick shooter. But I love those rogue type games, and you know, I'll keep coming back to them. I still play Vampire Survivors now, just not as much. So 3 totally recommended games. Go and watch the stream if you want to. It's recorded for its historical purposes of it. And then, of course, I did my blog last week, and that's pretty much it. Now, last week there was a question. I've got the answer written down here, but I can't remember what the question was, so I've got to just backtrack a little bit. Yeah, the question was, who went on a crime spree across Southern America after killing a would-be rapist? Now, I did mention a clue. I said it's one of my favourite directors. And anybody that knows about my directors is that I love Ridley Scott, right? So how many films has he done in Lower America where there was a rapist involved? It's Thelma and Louise. So hopefully it wasn't too difficult a one for you guys to work out on. But I've tried to do one a little bit more about games this week. So there's 2 questions. Okay. So you could get 100% here. The first one, very, very, very simple if you think about it, is which was the first video game played in space? Or should I say, what was the first video game played in space? Okay. And the second one, which you might need to look up, but a lot of people will probably know because of Atari's 50th anniversary, and that is, what does the word Atari mean in Japanese? 2 questions then. What was the first video game played in space? What does the word Atari mean in Japanese? And then my topic, which will be very, very quick. As I said, I love that this week in retro, and they talked about keyboards, and that got me thinking about mice, computer mice in particular. I want to know a little bit about the history of you buying mice in the past. Okay, what is it that you've looked for? Whether you took price into consideration, and when you bought your last one. Okay, now just to give you a piece of advice, I haven't actually looked at this mouse for donkey's years, right? Okay, but I used to buy mice like this Logitech mouse, and you can see it's a behemoth, but it was more ergonomic and had a wheel there and a wheel on top there. And it was wireless, and it went into a holder, and it was bloody expensive. Okay, and then I moved away from Logitech, and I started to buy Razer mice. So, like I say, I've I buy mice like this now. I don't know if you can see this one. This one's a Razer mouse. This one's the Naga Hex, and it's got some bells and whistles on it. But the reason I bought that one was because my mouse of the last 10 years is starting to now fail. I forgot what it's called. Doesn't have the name of it underneath it. But it's a lovely mouse. Let me just see if I can get that back into. There we go. And when it comes to mice in my past, it used to be it was a gimmick. Then it used to be the capabilities of it. Then it used to be the price of it. And sometimes I would pay the extra for it. You know, like it's got a laser lens. Its DPI is now so high that I could probably play it on the top of a pin or something and it'd be able to move. But I'd like to know a little bit about your consideration in buying mice, because I'll tell you now, other than sales or when a mouse breaks, I haven't bought a mouse in a long time. And being a hardware manager meant that me getting a mouse is used to be very, very simple. Of course, I'm not that type of hardware manager anymore. Mine's all now figure work. But back in the day, I could get a mouse whenever I wanted. Easiest thing in the world to do. And one of the mice I bought, and it's a famous story that I've talked about before. I bought the purpose-built mouse for black and white, which Logitech built, where it had a rumble feature, and as you moved your hand over the countryside, it vibrated, you know. So I've bought no end of them. What's your feelings about mice? Have you bought mice because of some gimmick? Have you bought mice because of the price? Have you bought them because they look colourful? Lots of things I'd like to know about that. And then we come to the end, I think, which usually is what's arrived this week. Let me bring them all over here because there's quite a few. Now, one I bought in a charity shop. It was £3. It was sealed. Reason why I bought it, but it had Irene Handel in it, and it was a comedy that I haven't seen called Maggie and Her. Haven't opened it yet. It says it's the complete series, but for £3 I just want to be able to see it. The first thing that arrived this week was this expensive big boy, which is the Hunger Games 4K Steelbook collection. As you can see, it's all Steelbook, it's in a hard case, and it's all glossy and lovely. The reason for that is that I've got the first two Hunger Games and I haven't got any others, and I've got them as steel books. I missed out on the collection that would have made it the whole thing, and buying the last two was too expensive. So when they released the box set and it's upgraded now to 4K, I put my name down for one. It is I think a limited number. Yes, I think it is, and so I can now sell my other two. They'll be going on eBay. That'll be happening in the next couple of weeks. I'm starting to get a pile up together of stuff I want to get rid of, and that's going to be happening. Then there's this Reservoir Dogs, but it's the 4K edition. It's a steel book, and I thought the cover was lovely. Now, it's not for the cover that I bought it. It's the fact that it replaces my Blu-ray edition. That's the reason for a lot of these that you're seeing old films for, because they're now upscaling to 4K. This one, I'm really looking forward to see whether they've done something with the picture on it. Then there's this one which I know very little about. It's called Nope, from the director of Jordan Peele, it says. All I've heard is that it's a pretty good film, but I know nothing about whether the picture quality is any good. I've actually heard mentioned it wasn't great, but it was cheap. It's 4K, it's another steel book, and it's one that I can throw away if I don't get enjoyment out of it. The back even looks quite good. Look at that little picture in the corner. It looks like a spaceship. It's got me intrigued anyway. Talking about space, there's a couple of Star Treks that have arrived. The Star Trek Picard Season 2, because I've got the first one, it's in steelbook, so of course it goes with my collection. Another real reason. There wasn't anything in Picard that I would say merited buying that as a collection set. But it just goes with my Star Wars set. And then there's this Titans of Cult first Star Trek film, not the motion picture. I'm talking about the Abrams different universe Star Trek. This comes with a couple of pins and all that sort of stuff. It's in a nice case. But Titans of Cult, which is the corner there, have numbering systems, and generally they're quite sought after. They don't make too many of them. And that really is the end. Thank you so much for listening to this crap. And I call it that because it is just my waffle of stuff that's happening this week and what's going on in my life. But every time I do something like this, I feel invigorated, something I need to do something more of. I think that I'm going to come out with the shortest waffle and it ends up being the longest. So this is getting way too long now, so I'm going to shut the f up and say I hope to see you next week, and be good to yourselves. Thanks very much. Bye bye.